Hello. So for the warm-up activity, I asked you to draw a picture of your favorite cartoon character. Now, not having seen them, but having seen thousands of other drawings in the past while doing this exercise, I would say 99% of people opted to use lines when drawing that cartoon character. And that's despite the fact that many popular cartoons today are not the old school cartoons that were just colored in lines. Um, there are cartoons made out of shapes, such as South Park. There are cartoons made out of three-dimensional forms, such as Blaze and the Monster Machines, Bubble Guppies, Clone Wars, and the list goes on. Yet, the vast majority of students use lines to draw their cartoons. Now, that goes to the psychology of visual communications. When babies first start messing around with drawing, they'll just draw with lines. It's just something about our nature that makes that the simplest and most effective way to communicate visually. And that is why that's going to be our first unit here in art class. And one of the first things that we're going to do is quite simply learn how to use our drawing instrument. And I'm going to show you. Still not the best YouTuber here. First, I want to show you what we're going to be using. You're going to be using pencils and the Sharpie markers that we're talking about. But first, let's take a look at the pencils. Pencils are made of graphite. They're a combination of graphite and adhesive. The graphite is the dark gray stuff that smushes into the paper and becomes the lines or the shades that you draw with. And the adhesive is the glue that holds it together. The more adhesive, the lighter the mark is going to be because it will release less of the graphite. What I have here is a typical number 2 pencil, which I have asked you to get. And this is called an ebony drawing pencil. And this is about the darkest pencil that you can draw with. Anything darker is just going to be straight charcoal. And I just want to show you the difference when you draw a line with a number 2 pencil, when you draw a line with an ebony pencil. See how much darker that ebony pencil is. And you can control line weights and line thicknesses better with a real drawing pencil. As you can see, the more pressure you apply, the darker the line is going to be. You can do the same with a number 2 pencil, but it's just, you don't get the same gradation and variation. Nonetheless, that's okay for Art 1, but if you're serious about art, you're going to want to get some real drawing pencils. And they come in different hardnesses. They make some that are super hard with a lot of adhesive that you can press really hard and still get a super light line. That's good for engineering and architecture. And they have different levels of hardness. There's like 20 different levels of hardness. This one right here is about in the middle, and this is about the darkest that we have. But for today's lesson, we're gonna use a number 2 pencil, and the reason being because the main goal of this lesson is actually to use our markers. The joy of unpacking fresh pens. Remember, we want to get the ultra fine point Sharpie, the one with the flatter top. And just to compare, I did get, I treated myself to do Sharpies. Here's the difference. This is the fine point. And let me just show you the difference. It still is, if it's brand new, it does have a pretty fine, pretty pointy tip. But here's the difference. Computer camera doesn't focus all that well. That's the one that you want to get. And now if you want to get both, that's great, because what that means is that you will be able to control more line thicknesses, and that's totally fine. But what you're going to do, today's lesson, there are some images on today's lesson in Canvas, and they're just practice exercise. And one of them will be vertical lines, horizontal lines, diagonal lines. What I want you to do, you're going to just create that swatch. Let's say we're doing vertical lines. You're going to draw it first in pencil. And then you're going to go over it with your ultra fine point Sharpie marker. But one thing I would like you to do, experiment with line weights. What happens if you press really hard? What happens if you press really soft? What happens if you draw fast? What happens if you draw really slowly? So I want you to experiment with different ways of controlling the pen. And then once you've inked each swatch, each little practice area, and you'll notice, where I did faster and less pressure, it's thinner. Where I did slower and more pressure, it's thicker. So I want you to experiment, but it does look kind of crappy because it's got the pencil. And the reason that we're using the number 2 pencil is because it's easier to erase. And this black Sharpie, that's not going anywhere unless you sand a hole through the paper. So you can just hit right over it with the eraser. Now, the eraser on the back of the pencil, that's fine. But really, if you get, a thicker plastic eraser, a nice, like this white plastic, or even a larger pink eraser, they'll work. But these are the best right here, especially if you're erasing pencil through ink. So here, you can see I erased, but there's still a little bit of remnants there on this side of your screen. Look at with this eraser, and that just gets rid of everything. And then this Sharpie, you have this gorgeous, rich black line against that bright white paper, and it's just, you're going to be so much satisfaction from doing these exercises. Now, you may find it boring to just draw square after square lines. If you want, you can draw a different picture and incorporate all these exercises into it. I remember one person drew an octopus, and each leg had a different one of the exercises in there. So feel free to be creative with anytime I assign kind of what may be boring exercises, feel free to be creative. Last thing I just want to show you is to compare the 2 pens. So if you get a brand new fine point Sharpie, you can still get some pretty thin lines, and you can have obviously more control over how thick it's going to be. So if you want to get both pens, go for it, because as you see, the lightest I press here and the darkest I press here is about the same. The lightest with the fine point and the hardest with the ultra fine point are going to be about the same, and then you can, ease off. So that's going to be it for today's assignment. Check out the link to the imagery, the exercise sheet. It's drawing exercise sheet 1. And enjoy the process of learning how to use pen and ink.